just that is went ahead and went on the screen in the right spot? Awesome, thank you, Christy. Okay. So what my focus is today is really looking on labels that we give our students and that students give each other in the classroom. So thinking off this morning, take a moment to think about all the things that kids are called and labeled every day. This may be by their peers, by their coaches, by their teachers. This could be because of a great grade on a test. This could be because of a not so great grade. It could be because of something happened at recess or any scenario that they're in. And open up that chat and just start throwing in ideas. What do we call each other? What do we label those students that are coming into our classrooms every day? And I'm going to give people about 3 minutes to just list as many as you can think of when you're reflecting on those students that you have this year. Don't worry about if one that you were thinking of pops up in front of you while you're going. Just keep adding everything that you can come up with as far as how students are labeled in the classroom. Going to give us about 30 more seconds to try and get as many labels as we can into that chat menu before we read through them. And as you're adding those last ones, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up to the top. And if you just want to take a second to sit back, and as we're thinking about our kids in our classrooms, this is what they're hearing on a daily basis, sometimes many times a day, sometimes from many different people. And just how does it make you emotionally think about those students that you have? So they're the jocks, they're kind, they're lazy, low, gay, helpful, smart, goody two-shoes, low income, special needs, behaviorally or socially challenged, they're gifted, they're low in academics, they're dumb, tall, small, pretty, excellent, popular, smart, talented, good and bad, the mean girls, needy, emotional, exhausting, loud, low achieving, high achieving, quiet, lazy, disruptive, good, bad, frustrating, the teacher's pet, fun, annoying, generally just those kids, talkative, outgoing, just like their brother or their sister, bratty, complainer, know-it-all, exceptional, advanced, anxious, mouthy, and weird. And I don't know about you, but when these labels are being thrown at us every day or being thrown about at our students every day, I can't imagine that they don't have some responses to that. And as we're just sitting here thinking about these students, I want to hear from their voice for a second. So if you would, go ahead and we're going to listen to a young lady from this TED Talk. Go ahead, you can hit, you can clear your screen if you want to while you watch, but watch the first 2 minutes and 40 seconds of this video called Let's Start a Label-Free School, and go ahead and mute yourself and then return to the screen when you've watched that 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Go ahead and mute. Whenever you've gotten to that 2 minute and 40 second start spot, if you'd just give me a quick thumbs up so I know where people are at. Thank you. Good time. All right. And as we've taken a second to, I'm going to come back to our screen here, to sort of setting that stage to thinking about our students and the labels that they heard every day, and then hearing from the student voice, I would love to, we have a pretty small group here today, so I'm going to keep it together. I just find there's a richer conversation with this size when we can stay together as a group. But what were some people's initial thoughts? If you would share out what grade level you teach, maybe what students you were thinking about, and what things are starting to kind of question in your mind when they're considering labels within your classroom. If you want to go ahead and unmute if I have somebody that's willing to kick off and share out. Thank you, Anne. I thought, Anne, you unmuted if you want to go ahead and share.
Oh, I was just unmuting, but I teach seventh graders, and what I was thinking is they're so labeled before they ever get there. And I liked how that girl said that the label stuck. And it seems like these labels stick. And how do you unstick them? I don't know. Do they unstick in high school? Do they change when I mean, I know that they change, they grow and mature, but are they stuck with the nerds, the jocks, the even the smart kids? Oh, well, I don't want to be in her group because she's smart and she'll know I'm dumb. And that's what I thought.
Thank you for sharing. Tanya, I saw that you had unmuted as well, if you're willing to share.
Well, my first thought when I saw that was, well, I work in the middle school, so I hear all kinds of names, and I was thinking, usually they're not very nice names that you hear kids labeling each other with, and sometimes teachers too. But I think as teachers, we try to help kids understand why that's not okay to give people labels and things like that. But at least at the middle school age, they're kind of stubborn to change how they feel about stuff. So I think maybe like Anne was saying, maybe as they mature, they kind of realize that they're more stereotyping. And of course, some of the kids are going to like keep their personality or whatever. So they're always going to have like some main labels put on them, but hopefully they will end up being like nicer kind of labels than the meaner ones.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else with responses or thoughts on just setting the stage and thinking about that? Thank you, Lisa.
I think, I don't know, when I was growing up, I was the shy, quiet person that always did right. So I was the goody, quiet. And actually that label has still stuck. I don't, when we had our high school reunion, I didn't go, but I had a lot of emotional baggage from that, that I was frustrated because people never really got to see me. They just assumed all these things. And because I was that, they just pushed me aside. And so my wonderings, I teach first grade, and I still see some of these labels, not as much, but I see them coming out. And my one son isn't going into middle school. So I'm like, how do you develop that resiliency in a child that they can stand up for themselves and be comfortable with themselves?
Oh, thank you for sharing. Yeah. Is there anybody else that had final thoughts?
I can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Gina.
Yeah, I when I was listing our labels, I think I was primarily going off of a lot of labels that are created by teachers instead of peers. And just like Lisa, I teach first grade as well. And I feel like kiddos at that age don't necessarily know that they're maybe labeling each other or what that even means. But I just think about, like, I'm in my 4th year of teaching, and I just have these opinions now about like doing end of year grade up, grade down meetings on the kids that I'm soon going to be having. And I've kind of started to opt out of those meetings because I want to give my kids a clean slate coming into my classroom. And I don't want to hear about brother and how brother was so hard in first grade. And because similar to Lisa as well, like I was given a label that didn't match me either when I was in school. I had a really troubled older brother, and there was the assumption that I was going to be troubled as well. And so I just think the teachers, unfortunately, a lot of teachers, and they might not even know it, but they are giving kids those labels to start off with as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. It's like really, really powerful. Bethany, I saw that you were jumping in there too. Oh, you're still on mute, Bethany.
Here we go. So I teach second grade, and kind of along with the other two were saying, I see some who are doing it to be mean, but a lot of kids, they just are noticing, they're like, oh, you're bigger, you're not as smart, you're not as, and they're not saying it to be mean per se. Some of them are, But I see a lot of just noticing, but then I know that those kids absorb that. They're like, oh, I am bigger than the other kids. I am, I do struggle, and so even if it's not meant to be mean, it's just an observation. I think those kids can internalize that. And so I've noticed that too.
Thank you guys. As like just a kickoff conversations. I feel like sometimes we don't have the opportunity to talk about these emotional and social things that impact our students. So thank you for sharing just those first thoughts as well. Not only do I feel like we don't have the opportunity to share this together, I don't know that we have the opportunity to talk about it with our students. And that's something that I intentionally do each year. There we go. I do this each year with a set of gifted students, and this is just a Wordle of asking them to go ahead and share all the different labels that they've been called by their peers. And if you haven't seen Wordles before, the tendency is that the word that comes up the most is largest in the image that's created. And for this group of students, I had about 23 kids that I asked to share their labels, and the word smart came up over 40 times. And I, of course, that sort of data wise went, what in the world is happening? And so I had to ask them. And I think like Bethany was speaking to, they went, well, smart can be good and bad, because though they're saying a positive thing about me, it comes with pressure. It comes with anxiety. It comes with expectations. And like many of you spoke to, these labels seem to stick, and they can tend to push us to say, okay, how am I expected to act? How do other people expect me to respond? And even from that very young age of something going, okay, if they've noticed this about me, they've noticed that I'm bigger than other kids, how do I need to act because of that? So just sharing, it's an activity that we do each year of just labeling. I put up a picture of a cartoon kid on the board and say, go ahead and label yourself. Let's see what comes out of that in those discussions. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about where we find these labels and where we see them most often in our schools, and practice labeling, which seems kind of weird and counterintuitive, but we're going to look at where we see this the most, which I find is in the lunchroom. It tends to be the space that we see those labels and those similarities that students have really drive their choices. So on the next slides, you'll see that we have some postage stamps. I am a huge advocate for bringing in tangible items into the classroom to have discussions with. We're obviously in a virtual world right now. So I'll make sure to share with you how this would normally go if you're in person, but also this is a virtual option for that. So what I've done with students is I give them bags of canceled postage stamps ripped off of letters, and they get to sort them into teams and into groups, and we have them make lunchroom tables. We obviously are not going to be able to sort through those together today. So on the next slides, I've sorted them for you into the virtual lunchroom. Your task is to take a gallery walk through slides 7 through 13 and of the different lunch tables. You're going to search for similarities in those groups and decide the stereotype or the title that you would give if these were a group of students, and share those out. Can be as many as you want for one. So each slide will look similar to this, where they'll have a set of stamps there. And by looking at the similarities, go ahead and adding in bullet points ideas for how you would label that group of stamps, or if you think about it, that group of students. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes to go through these slides. There's 6 to 7 tables. You feel free to turn your screen off if you like to think better that way, and I'll give you about a 1-minute warning when we're going to come back together. Are there any questions on those directions? Okay.
Are we typing directly into the presentation, your presentation?
Yes, go ahead and type directly onto the presentation. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and you guys have about 6 minutes to go through slides 7 to 13. As the different lunchroom tables fill up and people have been adding stereotypes and labels to those groups, take the last 2 minutes here as well to make sure and go back through and read the different ideas that everybody has added to kind of gallery walk back through those to see the different stereotypes that were shared. You have about a 1-minute warning. All right. So as we come back together, these labels are hysterical. I love you can tell the different angles that people were taking too. I know somebody shared that they were looking at it from that almost a point of teacher judgment space that sometimes that we can get into as well, but also from the student spaces and then to the interest points. We have things like our humanitarians and our really caring volunteers also can be labeled as our goody goodies. We have our jock page, many things with athletics, but also can be clicky and stuck up possibly. So I appreciate the different angles that people approached these tables with. The gardens, the outdoorsy ones. It's fairly easy to start finding similarities and noticing different interest points. And this is what our kids usually rely on. What we're gonna do as our next step here is we're going to go ahead and mix it up. On our next slides, you are going to claim a section on a slide by putting your name at the top. And then you're going to go back through these lunchroom tables and you're going to copy and paste 2 stamps from 2 different lunch table groups. On your slide with your new chosen stamps, you're going to identify as many similarities as you can between the 2 stamps you chose. I'm going to go ahead and model that on our presentation for a second and then go ahead and allow for everybody to do that. So for example, I would come down to slide 15. I'm going to add my name. I'm going to search back through my 2 slides and simply right click to copy and then come back to my section and paste 2 different stamps that maybe caught my eye as I was looking, or I could just completely randomly choose to give myself a little bit of challenge. So once I've added my 2 stamps to my slide, I'm going to go ahead and identify as many similarities as I can between those 2 stamps. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys about 5 minutes to capture those stamps and then add any similarities that you can. Do I have any questions? People are jumping on. Go ahead. If anyone was having a hard time finding a spot, I did add a couple extra spaces in there for people. You have about 2 more minutes. And coming back together in about 15 seconds. All right. So as I go ahead and share our screen here, I'm going to start back up with the slide that I started on and then just move through. And I would ask for people when we get to your slides section to go ahead and share out the 2 stamps that you chose. I'll go to that screen and what similarities you were able to find. And then just answering, what did you find more difficult, finding the similarities on our lunchroom tables or finding similarities between 2 stamps from 2 different tables? So the 2 that I grabbed really at random and just clicked quickly. And when I sat back and looked at them, I found they both have really bright colors in those pinks and blues and then the bright purples. And then I just went with that they're both rectangular. I had a more difficult time finding the similarities from the stamps from 2 different tables. I think because of the nature that I didn't put a ton of thought into how I chose them. Okay. Anne, would you be willing to unmute and share with us?
Sorry, I had to get to the screen where I could unmute.
That's okay.
Turn my video back on.
Yes.
I don't know. I maybe I didn't get the brief correct. I'm not sure, but I was just thinking of my students, and I have a lot that are from South America, and and they love soccer. And if I can find, I'm an English teacher, and if I can find books about soccers or soccer players or something like that, they just eat it up and they just love it. And I think it's interesting that how our society is just, we have these great big huge football fields that have scoreboards and grandstands and lights and all this, and the soccer field is usually the one behind the grandstands, or it used to be a playground or something like that. And I just think it's funny how our society would just will not let go of football, which is a horrible sport, I think. And my boys played it. But and my husband watches it, and and everything. But I just think that's interesting.
Awesome.
Just
Thank you.
sorry.
I like that you were
There's a
looking.
lot of comment there.
No, that's okay. I like that you found the similarity and the interest point for connection for your students. That's really great. Christy, you want to go ahead and share yours?
Sure. I thought that the randomness of the two that I grabbed, it was kind of difficult actually for me to find some similarities between the two. And when I was looking at them, I just, I instantly saw the colors. I thought it was much easier to do the lunch tables that were pre-sorted for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Tanya.
I found all the stamps really interesting, but these two I kind of just gravitated more to, so I grabbed them.
Mhm.
And then I just started listing different qualities I thought that the stamps showed. And so for me, I was going to originally say, just in general, the stamps that are already grouped, it was easier to find things. But since I found two that I was interested in similar ways, then for me, it kind of was the same difficulty.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Gina?
Okay. I'm trying to escape my toddler so I can talk. So excuse any background noise. So I chose two stamps that kind of had the same theme of loving all living things, loving the environment. And I guess I added another bullet point after the fact, but I also noticed that they're both kind of, with their colors, kind of feminine, but also very strong. I feel like kids at these lunch tables are confident in their interests and showing them and sharing them with other people. The assumption would be that they're also, good citizens that care about things outside of themselves. So that's kind of what came up for me.
Awesome. Thank you. And Laura B.
So I too chose two stamps that really had a hard time figuring out their similarities, but I think I couldn't figure out what kind of flower this was. I'm not really actually all that great on flowers, but identifying stuff like that. But I kind of looked at it as a magnolia, not sure if that's accurate or not. And I did live in the South for a while, and I just think magnolias are beautiful. They're classic and impressive. And so is that building. And I have traveled in Europe because I lived over there. But and I just reminded me of some of the locations that I went, and I honestly have wanderlust, and I love to travel. So I kind of saw the similarities in those that way.
Very cool.
And then they represent different countries.
Cool. Thank you.
And I took that as France and America. I don't know.
I know. I don't know where they're from either. Lisa.
Yeah, I thought, we're talking about labels, so I just randomly picked two and I struggled, but the car's red, the flower's red. They could both be found outdoors, and actually both can provide fond memories. A flower can remind somebody, hopefully, of a happy memory. And also, the old cars, you often bring up old family memories that can also provide happy memories.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. And I think those are our last ones. I find that when I talk with students as well, they struggle to find similarities from other students once they've been grouped. Once they're at those lunchroom tables, they tend to stay within those comfort zones. And as many of us identified, and what I went to straight first was to looks. What looked the same on these stamps? And it took us a little bit more of a push to think about those deeper understandings of what's the meaning behind this stamp. And as people started to push to connecting those to their students and what it could represent, we could more easily find these connections. But one thing that I always find similar as well, or simple. Oh, I do have one more. I'm so sorry, Bethany. I think that's yours. Did you want to share as well? So sorry.
Oh, am I there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't see myself. So yeah, I picked these two stamps. So the love and the cats, and kind of like what a previous person said, just caring more than about yourself. It just shows that they have caring hearts and they love, I don't know what the left one would represent, but caring for people probably, or just loving other things. And then the animal one, loving animals.
I just appreciate the capstone, and that where we're finding connection is in the emotions. And if we can get students to look at the emotions and the intent behind our actions versus just the looks of each other, we can find more similarities. A quote that I really love as well was from Joan Baez, and it says, "If people have to put labels on me, I'd prefer the first label to be human." And I wonder if simply anybody sat back and said, they're both stamps. They're both postage stamps. And I think with our students, we tend to focus on the agreements and the disagreements and what's underneath the surface and what we look like, but tend to sometimes forget to simply say we're both humans. And no matter what, that means we all have value. So in those conversations, this is an activity that I do with students. And after going through it, we just wanted to hear what some of your guys' follow-up thoughts were, where if you were to have these conversations with your students and thinking about your own classroom, to capture some of your thoughts of questions for discussion after they would have experienced this. Where would you take this piece of learning and experience with your own students at different ages? So if you want to take a second and just share on that slide and go ahead and type right on there so we can learn from our collective strengths as well, because there's so many different viewpoints on these. We'd love to hear some of those.
Mm.
Oh, I like somebody's approaching it from the essential question lens. How could this lead? It's totally Idaho Coaching Network. I'm in a junior high this year, so when I look at that, in a junior high, we can all find something in common, and many people spoke to that right off the get-go of thinking about this. Students don't practice finding similarities, but they're really good at practicing finding differences. So the more we can help them see we can find similarities and practice that is a great way to really push that. Feel free to keep adding any thoughts to that, but in essence of time too, and just to respect that you guys have had a long day and wanting to make sure you have some breaks before your last session as well. I wanted to share out with you guys a few other resources and just ideas if people are interested. At the end of this slideshow, you do have some links to a couple of articles. The first one is called Vulnerabilities with Gifted Kids, and this talks a lot about specifically gifted students and labels that they're dealing with. The next three are actually from a junior high English teacher who teaches the book The Outsiders and uses that story to really talk about labels and stereotypes in the classroom. So these three articles, The Dangers of Labeling People, The Effects of Stereotyping in Schools, and How Teachers Can Reduce Stereotype Threat in the Classroom, are articles that she has her students read and then jigsaw out to share with each other some of the ideas that they had. And then I also wanted to share with you guys a little bit of my passion and my geekiness that I'll completely own, in that I absolutely love postage stamps. It was one of those things that I don't know that I really, that I knew that I was going to fall in love with, and then went down the rabbit hole. There is the APS Society. It's called the American Philatelic Society, and they support teaching history through the usage of postage stamps in the classroom. So on this link, there's a couple of things here. If we click on this bottom link, it takes us to their website on Stamps Teach. What they have here are lesson plans broken out by grade level. And these are lesson plans for math lessons on doing math and counting for our primary students and using the array model. They're English lesson plans on using a postage stamp to inspire a story for creative writing prompts. And if you had this postage stamp, where can you go with it? Geography lessons, obviously, in teaching is great. I've had students take piles of stamps and sort them into countries and by continent, and then we create artwork and murals with them. There's tons of great ideas. Then I'm sure everybody's going, that sounds nice, but how do you get a bunch of postage stamps? There is a link on here that says register for Stamps Teach. They support classrooms, and if you register, it is free to sign up, and we'll send you probably about 10,000 stamps off paper that are soaked. They tend, which is probably about 3-gallon size Ziploc baggies full of postage stamps. They sort them into US history, then they have kid-friendly bags, and then they'll have others that are world stamps. So from all over the place. It's great in exploration tables. I know we had a couple of first grade teachers, so just having those as a center station to identify what do you notice, practice counting, and it's a free support for teachers. Along with that, they also send some books. I'll hold them up. One on American symbols through postage stamp history and looking at that. They also send stamp albums for all of your students where they can practice sorting stamps by different themes. So they have areas to keep their own stamp collection and post those on there. And it's a lot of fun to see students' passions sort of be ignited just with the curiosity of looking at a postage stamp. It's something that I've completely fallen in love with just watching kids explore. Just looking at the postage stamps are completely, they're a little bit, I get lost in them. They're a lot of fun. Christy helped me sort for our lunchroom tables and we ended up sorting like 15 different tables because we couldn't stop ourselves and said, okay, now we've gone too far. But it is something that I think the more often you can bring an actual tool into the classroom and a primary piece of history, kids really fall in love with it as well. So I encourage people to possibly sign up for Stamps Teach, get those resources in, and see where your creativity could take you. And as we wrap up a little bit early today so that you guys can breathe in the afternoon, I do ask, just because I think when we write it down, we remember it, to go through, grab a slide for an exit ticket, add your name, and think about 3 things you want to remember today. I know we didn't solve student labels and student stereotyping, but we went through an experience of how we could have those conversations with our students. So 3 things you want to remember from this experience, 2 questions or curiosities you still have and want to explore further, and possibly 1 thing that you've thought about that you could take back to your classroom. And as you're doing that, I'm also here for any final thoughts or questions that anybody has. I'm gonna hit. And I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming and participating today, for sharing your thoughts and your sort of experiences with each other as well. And as you guys wrap up that exit ticket, feel free to leave the meeting whenever you are done and do what you need before that final session today. I just super appreciate this setting of having other teachers and allowing us to all take risk and giving each other grace in learning together. So I appreciate it, and I wish you all the best end of the fourth quarter as we wrap up this momentous year. So thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. What a great concept and just resource to pass on and actually take and use like next week if we really wanted to in some way. Thank you so much for taking your time, and everyone else for session 3. It is finished. I would say we're supposed to go at 1, so maybe you have 20 extra minutes or so. So go ahead and take a nice break and grab a snack or some water, whatever, and then join your session 4, your last one, which will start at 1:15. because there's a break after this as well. So be back to session 4 at 1:15, and you can find that on your schedule in your email. Laura and I will hang out for a few minutes. You can unmute if you wanted to chat or anything else as well. Otherwise, take a nice break.